All right, so looking at Alcaraz's older serve, in his old serve, Alcaraz kind of starts in a relatively upright stance with limited early torso rotation. His shoulders stay quite square at the beginning, and the racket hand already begins moving away from the body rather than staying sort of compact. This setup kind of delays body coil, puts more kind of responsibility on the arm later on, a little bit later in the motion, rather than being kind of fluid with the initiation of the serve. If you kind of look at the toss and the initial loading phase, you'll kind of see how as the toss rises, his upper body is still quite tall. The racket arm stays wide. You'll see how the arms kind of go up together, and his right arm actually extends away from his body with the tip of the racket actually pointing up out to the side at the beginning. You can see how he's extending up here with his left arm. And what you'll also see is when the racket's up, he still is a little bit late to get into the pinpoint position. So a lot of players, they get into that pinpoint position pretty quickly, whereas Alcaraz has a slight delay getting into that position. So it's not until the ball is still rising as he starts to get that leg moving forward, and he actually brings those feet together. So you'll see in his loading phase here, as he's loading onto in his serve, you'll see that the racket head is pointed this way, and it's a bit unusual actually to kind of have the racket out to the side like this. You don't see that many players loading with the racket out that way from their body, and he has very little coil with his torso at the beginning of the serve. You can see that there's little kind of coil going through his torso and his hips. Everything's quite sort of square. He's very side on. He's got the racket out to the side. Whereas usually, like if we saw Roger or Novak in this position, we'd see a little bit more of their chest. So he's a little bit late to do his racket drop here. So as the balls, you can see the ball's in this position. And you can see just as the ball now starts falling, he starts to go into his leg drive. You can see he's really started to load into his legs here. And this is when he initiates his racket drop. And a lot of kind of club players get this part mixed up. You'll see a lot of people saying, oh yeah, make sure you drop the racket behind your head. Like, the guy's not really thinking about that. He's just thinking about, can he push up through his legs? And if he's loose enough with his hand, that upward momentum just naturally lets the racket lag back behind your head. And you can see that the tip of the racket's now down, and now he's really kind of exploding up into the contact. You can see how he's leading with the edge of the racket. You can see the edge of the racket's on, and then he makes contact slightly on the right side of his body, just to the right side of his head, and he's got full extension with his hitting arm. A lot of club players tend to have a slight bend when they make contact with the ball. So you can see he's really extending up to contact in this position to just really maximize his leverage. And we can see how after he makes contact with the serve, he gets a very good leg drive, and he lands on that left leg. So this is a great sort of posture to finish in. He's very balanced after he hits the serve, and then he gets into his ready position. I kind of feel like he's missing a few. I mean, obviously, I'm not criticizing the guy. The guy's obviously a great player, but it's pretty insane how he gets as many free points as he does with this serve. Just because here he's almost having to produce all of the power through his legs and just sheer power with his upper body and his arm, because there's very little racket lag and momentum on as he's bringing the racket up into the trophy position. He's almost not getting any sort of free momentum here. He's just holding the racket out to the side with it up, and then it's almost slightly delayed. And I feel like with a lot of other players like Sinner or Federer, they're much kind of looser in their swing path as they get up to the trophy position. And so I almost feel like Alcaraz is just using sheer strength and force to just get a lot of power out of his serve. The guy's very physical, so he can kind of get away with it. But yeah, it's just interesting to see how he manages to hit some pretty big serves like this. So now if we kind of move on to his new serve, some of you might be like, oh, like this is a slightly old clip, like it's from the Nito ATP Tour Finals in 2025. The other video was at the Paris Masters, I think, in 2023. Some of you might be thinking, oh, but you've not seen his serve like during his preseason in 2026. I mean, it's early days. Like, this is a fairly recent tournament where he's been tweaking the serve, and there are some significant changes in this serve from the one about 2 years ago, I think. So let's just have a look. When I was trying to find a video of this new serve, I couldn't really get a good video where it was right from behind. So I had this one, but so it might be 1 or 2 frames behind. But he changed the beginning of his serve here. You can see how the string, so he's actually he did start a little bit higher here, but I just missed this part of the video. But you can see how he's dropping the racket down at the beginning of the serve. And his left arm is raising up as he's dropping the wrist with this arm. So I think that's a big difference of what's happening on his new serve. Whereas you'll see that if I just wind it back onto the old serve, you'll see how both arms go up. Both arms are raising up together this way. So if I drew a line kind of through his waist, you'll see that his new serve, the tip of the racket, is now down. So you'll see he actually leads with that tip of the racket down now. And whereas before you can see the tip of the racket's up in that position. So it's a little bit more Novak-like. He's just beginning the serve a little bit looser at the beginning. He's not so sort of rigid in his right arm. There's a little bit of a bend at the beginning, whereas he just kind of straightened it out right at the beginning. So you can see how now he's actually also he's doing a little bit of an earlier coil with his body now. So he's not as straight on. He's actually coiling his waist, and we can almost see that logo. We can see that Total 90 logo on his shirt there. Whereas before he had very little shoulder and hip coil. He was very late to coil on the serve. So now he's actually just initiating this coil a little bit earlier. So we can almost see his torso a little bit now. And the strings of the racket, you can see the strings as he begins to take the racket up. We can see here he's a little bit quicker as well to get into the pinpoint stance. So that back foot, the back foot's going to get close to his front foot a little bit quicker now. So there. So if I just show you this one, so we can see he's much more coiled now. So on this video, as he gets into the pinpoint, you can see that he's very straight on. So he's very straight on here, whereas now we can really see that there's a little bit more coil through the body. We can see that logo on the shirt. And now, looking at the racket, the change in where the racket is pretty drastic. So we can see the tip of the racket, the strings are almost pointing off to the side, whereas when he was in the loading phase, on his old serve, the tip of the racket was up. And I just think by doing this, it's way more efficient. It's way more efficient doing it like this. It's almost how the body wants to work. The biomechanics want to be a bit more fluid like this to be efficient with the body rather than forced. So we can see as he goes into the leg drive now, he's a little bit earlier to initiate leg drive and get into this racket lag phase. And I feel like where he makes contact now is slightly higher as well. So I feel like he's getting a little bit more snap on the serve. It's probably a little bit harder to read. And also that coil's just, he's uncoiling his body now, so he's getting a bit more rotation and stored ground energy, because when you sort of, he's bending his knees, loading his legs, and he's also storing that energy through his core. So when he does go into his rotation, it's just a little bit more explosive, but more effortless as well. Whereas before, he was just kind of really muscling the ball. And just by, to be honest, it's just brute strength. It's still good technique. I mean, we're not saying this technique's bad. We're just saying, it's fine margins, and he's looking for a little bit more free pop on the serve. And he seemed to find that by just being a little bit looser at the beginning. You can see it's a little bit more Novak-like, how he just lets that racket drop down as the left arm goes up. He brings that pinpoint stance in a little bit earlier, and then he drives up, letting that wrist go all the way through the contact. And that's kind of the difference between his old and his new serve. Obviously, that's just a quick analysis from what I see. Some of you might think a little bit different, but that's kind of what I see. And I'll be watching his new serve in 2026 at the Australian Open. We'll see how that serve kind of pans out for him. But yeah, I feel like he's probably going to do quite a bit of damage with his new serve. So if you guys want your own serve analyzed, then check the link in my bio and you can get me to break down your serve and give you my feedback, and we can get you improving any shot in your game. So just check that out, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks.